Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for popping along to the University of Leicester Digital Open evening. My name's Stuart, and I'm here with Dr. Ben Parsons from the English department at the university. And Dr. Parsons is going to run through a presentation for the first half an hour. There will be a Q&A session after the presentation, and I'll put some details into the chat there. But for now, over to you, Dr. Parsons.
There we are. Okay, so we're up and running, I think. Well, as Stuart said, thank you for that introduction, Stuart. Welcome everybody to this talk about English at Leicester. I have you for the next 45 minutes, so hopefully you'll find plenty of useful information in the course of this talk. I'll start off by introducing myself, just to kind of reinforce who I am and what I do here, and to give you kind of some sense of what I'll be talking about. So I'm, again, Ben Parsons. My email is up there as well. So if you do have any kind of questions that you want to pose that sort of spring into your head after this event, do feel free to make use of that, and I'll be only too happy to field any inquiries you might have. So I'm based in English, which is in turn part of the sort of larger School of Arts, Media and Communications, which is a kind of administrative sort of confection, but it does mean that we do have a lot of contact with other kind of disciplines around English, which allows us to sort of produce a degree that is quite interdisciplinary and quite exploratory and all about kind of thinking across different sort of boundaries rather than being confined to a kind of traditional, quite sober idea of English literature in sort of strict isolation from other ideas and other approaches to things. I personally teach kind of across the curriculum, so if you do kind of enroll here, you'll very likely to see me at some point or other. I kind of span everything from sort of medieval ballads, very kind of early literature in English, right through to kind of more contemporary work. So recently I'm starting to teach increasingly different sort of popular genres of fiction. So things like crime fiction and horror fiction and science fiction, as I say, kind of it becomes an increasing part of my teaching activity. But as I say, I kind of straddle across the entirety of the curriculum. So as I say, if you do join us as a student, you will meet me in person at some point along that journey. So here's a kind of breakdown of what we'll be talking about today, and here's the various sort of topics I'm going to be running through in the course of this presentation. So first of all, I'm going to start off with some information about our institution, so tell you about Leicester itself, a bit about its history, a bit of its kind of identity as a university, what sets it apart, what sets us apart from other kind of competitor institutions around the UK, before I kind of narrow things down and think about English itself at Leicester and what, again, kind of is quite unique and quite different about the, well, both about the department and the people that work there and our kind of working culture and approach to the discipline, but also what's sort of different about the degree that we offer and how it sort of prepares students for their kind of entry into working life. I'll tell you a bit about in detail the degree itself, running through what you're likely to be studying at various different points in the degree. I'll tell you quite a lot about kind of year one, but we'll also lead you through kind of years 2 and 3. You can see how all the kind of components of the degree sort of slot together and how they all kind of reinforce and support one another and support you as you move through your 3 years with us. I'll tell you a bit about the kind of logistics of studies, so some material about our teaching methodologies and our assessment style here, and to give you some of the kind of more practical kind of insights into how those things are run here. And I'll move towards thinking about where it can take you. So thinking about kind of employability, and as this will become kind of a bit of a refrain from this talk, you'll find that employability and employability concerns are kind of quite embedded quite deeply in the degree that we offer here. This is not a kind of abstract idea of literature and English literature that we propose here. Actually, we have a kind of clear idea woven into the degree itself of careers and where opening kind of different prospects and different kind of opportunities for you, and allowing you to kind of explore and encounter different sort of careers options that will become available to you after graduation. If there's time, I'll tell you a bit about kind of student life at Leicester and a little bit of kind of insight into what it's sort of actually like studying here at a kind of social level as well. And I'm going to round things off with a kind of seminar style exercise. So a kind of discussion exercise which is based on something I do with my own students in year 1 to get them thinking about poetry and how we kind of tackle and interpret poetic language. based around a series of riddles written in the kind of early Middle Ages. And then finally, we'll wrap things up with a kind of question and answer session. And I should point out that I'm not going to kind of wait for you to sort of pose the questions. If you do have any questions along the way as I'm talking, if there's anything you want me to kind of elaborate on or kind of pick out in that kind of final session at the end there, then please do put those in the chat, and I'll come back to the questions as you pose them at the end, and we'll hopefully kind of resolve any kind of queries that you have. So Leicester itself. So as the slide says, we're one of the kind of sort of slightly newer universities in the United Kingdom. We were founded in 1921. We're still over 100 years old, of course, and it founded specifically in the wake of the First World War, which of course ended in 1918. And we were actually founded by the people of Leicester, by a local businessman, Thomas Fielding Johnson, who using the kind of early form of crowdsourcing, actually raised the funds to found the university from the people of Leicester itself, as conceived as a kind of living memorial to the First World War. And we're very kind of proud of that kind of legacy, and the fact that we do kind of commemorate the past as much as we kind of look forward to the future, and also the kind of close links with the local community that kind of foundation story sort of presupposes as well. The fact that we do kind of work very closely with the people of Leicester, and we hold kind of festivals and talks specifically in English as well, and I'll say more about those later on, in which we invite the kind of sort of involvement of the people of Leicester. So we're very much a kind of outward looking as well as forward looking and backward looking institution, commemorating the past, looking forward to the future, and believing in the kind of transformative value that education can have, both in its kind of local setting and in a kind of wider national, indeed international setting as well. So we've also kind of garnered a few sort of awards that are quite impressive over the past year or so as well, that are worth kind of flagging up as well, to give you a kind of sense of where we're positioned as an institution. We were awarded the Daily Mail University of the Year in 2025 in recognition of the quality of the work that's being carried out here and the quality of education and the training that we give our students. We've been nominated in the University of the Year awards by the Times Higher and by the Sunday Times as well. And actually made the kind of shortlist in both of those cases against a kind of a dozen sort of competitor institutions in the UK, again in recognition of the sort of groundbreaking work that we're doing here. More kind of perhaps important, however, is the fact that we were recently ranked gold in what's called the TEF, the Teaching Excellence Framework. Gold is the actual kind of the highest level possible. And again, that's kind of recognition of the fact that the teaching that's carried out here, the actual kind of instruction that students receive, is of the kind of that sort of highest, most sophisticated level. So if you do sort of enroll as a student here in English, it is a kind of guarantee, I suppose, that the education you're receiving has been recognised as being of the sort of highest calibre and quality that's attainable in the United Kingdom. Also, another sort of important statistic is the National Student Survey, and I'll be talking a bit more about the Student Survey as a kind of indicator of how well we're doing sort of later on in relation to English specifically. But we've also been placed top 30 in the annual survey of students in higher education for overall positivity, which is again another kind of a really important feature, and it shows that, you know, what a kind of welcoming and sort of lively, vibrant institution we are at kind of student level too. Okay, another thing that's sort of worth pointing out as well is that we do guarantee accommodation for all first year students. In fact, the offers that we make to our first years are predicated on the fact that accommodation is available. So we do not make an offer to a student without there being a place available in one of our two big accommodation areas, either the city accommodation, which is in Leicester itself, or Oadby Student Village, which is just slightly on the outskirts of Leicester. In fact, it's worth kind of flagging up about Oadby as well. There is a free shuttle bus. So Oadby is about kind of 10 minutes drive away. So it's relatively close to the campus, but to ensure that students can kind of get back to the campus and back to their accommodation safely and quickly and kind of efficiently to attend all the kind of teaching events they need to. We do have a free shuttle bus, which is accessible just by kind of swiping with your student card, that moves back and forth between Oadby and the central campus several times an hour, I think 5 times an hour at peak times, again, to ensure that students are able to kind of reach their learning events on the central campus as freely and as safely as they possibly can. It's also a relatively kind of cheap, the accommodation here. It's amongst the cheapest in the United Kingdom. Offered from the price of £69 a week with all bills included. And of course, if we're other cities, particularly our kind of capital city, you would find a very different sum attached there. So again, the accommodation is kind of quite affordable, and also there are kind of arrangements in place to ensure that you can move very freely between campus and the kind of centralized accommodation that we offer. Okay, moving on now to English specifically. So again, a few more kind of statistics for you there as well. So you'll see that we are 10th in the UK, and two of the kind of big national sort of university polls, so national kind of university league table, sorry, I should say. So The Guardian has ranked us 10th in the UK for 2025 for the second year in a row. It's worth pointing out as well. So this is a kind of relatively sort of stable sort of placement we've received. The Times Good University Guide has also put us 10th in the UK. This is out of 96 institutions, by the way, that offer English as a discipline, and puts us, you know, ahead of quite a number of our Midlands kind of rival institutions. I won't list them because that would be kind of bad form. But as I say, so again, it's another kind of guarantee that the education you're kind of receiving here has been sort of recognised in the national press as being within the sort of the top 10 of institutions offering English as a degree. It's also worth pointing out some of the kind of other statistics kind of packaged up in these league table placings. So the Times Good University Guide also recognises as being 10th in the UK for graduate prospects. So again, our graduates, have kind of excellent kind of employability prospects after their kind of graduation with us. It's also worth kind of flagging up that kind of fourth statistic there and going into a bit more kind of detail with that, which places 11th in the UK, or 10th in England if you prefer, in what's called the Research Excellence Framework. So the Research Excellence Framework is a kind of 7 or 8 yearly audit of the research, the kind of publications, the research projects that are carried out at higher education institutions around the country, because obviously universities are sort of places where research as well as teaching kind of happens as well. And the publications by myself and my colleagues have been ranked 11th in the UK, which means that I think it was nearly all of them were sort of thought to be either of world leading or international significance and status. So what that means is, I mean, again, it's a statistic, it may be kind of relatively kind of empty numbers, but what it does mean is that again, you will be being taught by the very same people that are kind of advancing the fields of knowledge that they're kind of instructing you in. As you're attending seminars and lectures, the people that are actually sort of instructing you in, whether it be the kind of Gothic, Victorian literature, Romantic literature, early modern literature, these are the same people that are kind of producing really kind of original path-breaking research into those particular fields. So you're learning kind of knowledge that's kind of brand new as it's being kind of developed. It also means that we do see because we're all kind of active researchers in English as well. We're all kind of actively engaged in kind of learning and finding out and investigating kind of new things as we're kind of asking you to do the same thing as students. So it does produce it fosters kind of collaborative sort of sense of our kind of identity and our relationship with our students. We don't see ourselves as occupying a kind of higher rung in a hierarchy, because we're all learners. We're all kind of carrying out kind of learning, finding out new things, trying out kind of new ways of reading texts, exploring sort of new bits of information. So we do see ourselves and our students as being kind of fellow travelers on the same journey, that we don't see ourselves as being kind of oracles who kind of impart information that's kind of infallible. We're also kind of learning. We're also sort of developing our own knowledge as we're developing your knowledge as well. And this is something that our students do recognize. So I've got a couple of quotes on the screen here. And the books that are raining down just kind of reinforce my last point about kind of how active we are as writers and researchers. These are all books that have been published recently by myself and my colleagues in the department. So there's a couple of quotes on here from graduating students, again from the National Student Survey, and the things that our students do sort of recognize is the fact that we are kind of approachable, that we do think of ourselves as kind of students ourselves, but also the fact that the degree that we offer, and again this is going to be another of the refrains that I will be kind of picking up on throughout the rest course of this talk are very kind of varied, because again, we're all kind of researchers. We all have their own specialisms. We're all kind of working in our own fields. We're all developing our own little kind of corners of knowledge. It means we can bring all that research into the teaching we produce and offer a real kind of variety of different kind of options throughout the degree. It's a very kind of malleable degree that we offer, one that offers a lot of choice to students, that gives that really does put student choice at the forefront. It means you can shape your studies around your own interests or use it to kind of explore and encounter kind of brand new material that you've not seen before. As I say, it's a very kind of choice heavy, very option heavy degree. And that optionality kind of even feeds into the range of degrees we offer in English. There's various ways of studying English. Our most popular degree is the single subject BA in English. You can study this for 3 or 4 years. The 4-year version, it comes with a year abroad, and students effectively, it sort of extends the degree by a year if you choose to do a year abroad. Again, as I say, it's completely optional. There's no kind of compulsion to do it. You also don't need to make the decision of whether you want to do the year abroad at the point of application. You can make your decision about whether you want to go overseas for year 3 in the course of your first year, and you can use that your first year to gain kind of information about it in the different destinations that we offer. We offer a whole range of destinations around the world, both kind of on the continent, in the US, South America, and even the Far East as well. Students have kind of gone to for that year abroad. As I say, it's not an option. You don't have to kind of tell us when you apply that you want to do it. You don't have to kind of commit to that. You can learn more information about it in the course of your first year and then apply for the year abroad version of the degree at the end of that first year. But the point in structurally, the year abroad is a kind of insert year between years 2 and 3. So it stretches the degree to a 4-year one, but you go overseas for your kind of 3rd year and you return for your final year, which becomes your 4th year as a result. It's actually much simpler than I'm making it sound. This kind of convoluted version is not the kind of the simple kind of practical version you'll experience if you do choose to do that year abroad. All of the degrees we offer, in fact, do come with that year abroad option. I should point out as well. It's not a kind of peculiarity of the BA in English. The BA in English is, of course, the broadest degree that we offer, which kind of incorporates most of the kind of optional modules I'll be talking about, and it's the degree that I'm going to base the rest of this talk on as a result, because it is the degree, I say, that most of our students do kind of sign up for, and also the one that is kind of most holistic and covers most of the sort of options as well. However, there's also opportunity to study English in a kind of 50-50 split with another discipline if you want to. So also popular as a BA English and History degree, in which you will be studying those two disciplines side by side, dedicating half your time to one, half your time to the other, and hopefully finding them kind of very complementary of each other. After all, they do sort of click together very neatly, and in fact we do collaborate very closely with our colleagues in history. And you'll be learning about the kind of circumstances and the conditions in which the texts you were encountering on English were written in history, and in English you'll be sort of actually tapping into real historical voices you can apply on the history side of the degree. So hopefully you should find the two disciplines do sort of slop together very kind of neatly, kind of dovetail and I say support one another. There's also the opportunity to say BA English and American Studies together as well. English and journalism. You can also study English with a language or English with film. And again, all of these are kind of 50-50 splits in which you spend half your time studying one discipline, half your time studying the other. If anyone has any questions or wants any details about these degrees, then please do pop your questions in the chat and I'll pick up on this thread at the end. There's also the opportunity to explore, to take the BA English with creative writing. This is slightly different in terms of the ratio allocated between the two disciplines, in that you'll be studying English literature for 75% of your time and creative writing for 25%. I should also point out that all of the creative writing options that are sort of locked into the BA English with creative writing are also available to students taking the BA English degree as well. So if you want to kind of dip in and out of creative writing without kind of being fully committed to studying it as a kind of formalized part of the degree, you will have access to the creative writing options as part of the BA English degree if you want to kind of just dip in and out of it on a more casual basis. Okay, moving on. So I'm going to kind of talk about the first year now, and particularly I'll begin by kind of giving you using one of the kind of modules and encounter on that first year as a kind of specimen of how the first year as a whole works. And one of the first things to say about that first year is that it's very much designed as a kind of foundational year. So it's all about kind of introducing you to the sort of basic essential skills that you'll need to kind of use throughout the course of your degree in order to ensure that everybody kind of enters year 2 and then year 3, those more kind of heavily optional years, with the same kind of toolkit, the same kind of vocabulary, the same kind of methodology, the same kind of sense of what we're asking you to do with the assessments as well. So it's all about, as I say, kind of laying that kind of bedrock of kind of fundamental skills in English. And as a result, the modules that you'll take in that first year are very much kind of engineered to sort of cover those kind of elements of studying English. And so it's the most kind of core and compulsory sort of year of the degree. It's the year of the degree in which most of our sort of core modules are sort of concentrated, and each one is kind of focused on a particular area of English, a particular kind of fundamental sort of field, and getting you kind of comfortable kind of talking about the particular material that it's dealing with. So the module I'll use, as I say, as a kind of specimen. On the one hand, it is a kind of representative of that general sort of purpose of the first year, in that it is very much a module that's focused on getting you sort of confident as a sort of writer and researcher on the novel. So it is a module about prose and how to analyze prose, how to discuss prose kind of effectively, when, after all, the piece of assessment you'll be producing will be, by definition, a lot shorter than the novel that you will be analysing. How to kind of condense novels and write about them kind of effectively. As I say, it's very kind of skill focused on how to deal with prose, but it also kind of picks up on a couple of other sort of general kind of philosophical sort of imperatives that drive the rest of the degree as well. So it's, as I say, it's about kind of analysis of prose, and introducing students to the kind of fundamentals of discussing prose, the sort of vocabulary and the concepts they will need to kind of make headway, breaking down a kind of a lengthy novel and making sense of it. But it's also about the kind of history of the novel as well, and looking at the kind of development of the novel as a form, from its kind of emergence as the sort of dominant narrative form in the kind of early Victorian period, up to the present day. In fact, the final novels on the module was written in the kind of 21st century itself. However, as well as kind of thinking about the novel historically, it also thinks about it kind of geographically. So it's not a kind of a chronological sort of survey. It's also thinks about the novel as something that has become a kind of global property instead. I mean, after all, part of the kind of history of the novel, particularly in the kind of late 20th century, 21st century, is that it has become indeed a kind of globalized property. Now, the English novel is no longer written exclusively in England or the United Kingdom. We have English literatures, English novels being written in the Caribbean, in India, in Africa, and of course in the Americas as well. And of course, this spread is as a result of the kind of legacy of empire. And so a lot of these kind of international writers represent voices kind of writing back to the kind of legacy of empire, answering back. The novel has become a kind of vehicle for sort of addressing and engaging with the inheritance of colonialism and the empire itself. And so really the module is designed to kind of address these questions and to sort of bring students into contact, as I say, with a range of kind of international voices writing in English, but also thinking about the ways in which they in turn engage with the sort of canonical English novel. So the earliest novel we look at is Jane Eyre, very important sort of pioneering novel, which really did in the 1830s sort of show the sophistication that the novel was capable of. After all, in previous centuries, it was often dismissed as something that was either kind of childish or kind of feminine. Ironically, the female writers, the Bronte sisters, did sort of show it was capable of very kind of sophisticated, very sort of passionately kind of argued structures and positions. However, we think about Jane Eyre alongside the work of a Caribbean writer based in in Antigua in the 1950s, Jean Rhys, who writes this kind of fantastic, ferocious, hallucinogenic, wonderfully kind of evocative and rich novel, Wide Sargasso Sea, which is what we would now call a kind of prequel to Jane Eyre, which is kind of designed to sort of, as I say, kind of answer back to Jane Eyre. It takes sort of the story of Rochester's disastrous first marriage and sort of puts that kind of in the spotlight on center stage. It is very much about Rochester's kind of experiences in Jamaica as a plantation owner, and again, as I say, kind of uses the novel as a way of kind of thinking about the legacy of colonialism, and a story that sort of flickers in the margins of Jane Eyre, but which Charlotte Bronte doesn't kind of quite dare to address in full, becomes here the kind of main thread of the plot. And so it's almost kind of, it's very close to kind of criticism in the way that it kind of engages with and pastiches Jane Eyre, while sort of telling a story that the novel itself doesn't quite manage to assert. This pattern kind of continues with the rest of the reading. As I say, you can use this module as a kind of specimen of not only the kind of quantity of reading you'll tend to find on a kind of English degree module, but also a specimen of how the sort of contents are kind of put together in kind of tensions and dialogues with each other that students are kind of asked to explore. We also look at Passage to India by E.M. Forster, again a kind of quite vitriolic attack on the Raj written at the beginning of the 20th century, and we pair that with Animals, People, an equally vehement sort of attack written from the position of someone who's received the very worst of kind of international capitalism. We think about Zadie Smith's N.W., which we end on as well, which is based in the London postcode and the very cosmopolitan kind of vibrant culture that postcode it plays host to. And we also think about Black American literature, Black American LGBTQ literature, in fact, in the form of Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin. So you can see how the module is very much kind of engineered to sort of bring different voices onto the stage and to sort of allow students to see the kind of tensions and the kind of the competition between them as they kind of engage with each other, and as we kind of engage with the kind of dialogues built up around them. Okay, well, that's, as I say, the novel Around the World. Students, which covers sort of prose. You'll also find in the first year, again, a concentration of other core modules which cover the other sort of major areas of studying English. So we have Writing Matters, which is, as its title suggests, is all about academic writing and spelling out clearly how writing at university level is different from writing at A level, and the different kind of skills and kind of competencies that involves, and thinking about basically it's to kind of soften that transition as you move from sort of one area to another, to spell out exactly what the kind of different requirements are for writing for a degree as opposed to writing for A level, how you kind of cope with the sort of different kind of criteria that are used, the sort of requirement to research criticism as well as kind of primary materials, how you incorporate critical voices into your work without it just kind of swamping them. As I say, it's about covering those kind of fundamental skills in your own writing, getting you kind of confident as a researcher and as an analyst and as someone who kind of feels that they can engage intelligently with other people's work, other people's critical work. Alongside the writing module, we have one on poetry as well, which again ranges over several different sort of periods and asks students to kind of consider how poets use kind of different techniques to kind of shape the meanings in different kind of periods of time. You'll encounter a huge range of material, even in a single week, thinking about how form or tone or meter or voice have been kind of deployed by different poets. It's a very kind of technical module that's very much designed to kind of get students thinking about poetry in technical terms, giving them a kind of sense of what to look for in a poem when you're trying to trace out how it develops and creates its meaning. We also have a kind of theatrical module in the module Renaissance Drama, which focuses very much on kind of theatre as performance, asks students to think about how the plays of the Tudor and Stuart stage are performed today, what decisions directors make and actors make in order to kind of bring these sort of off 300-year-old text to life in the here and now, and the assessment isn't kind of engineered to sort of get students kind of thinking about these ideas. Students are asked to write a review of a contemporary Shakespearean or other Renaissance play, and think about again how directors have kind of enabled that text to make a journey from sort of page to stage, how they've kind of breathed life into it, what the text has kind of required them to do in order to sort of animate it. So the point is, you can see that first year is very much all about getting students introduced and confident. Again, as I say, confidence is key in the sort of 4 major food groups of studying English: prose, poetry, writing itself, and drama. Introducing each of those, ensuring everyone enters year 2 and 3 in a kind of informed way with this similar kind of conceptual toolkit and vocabulary. Moving into, well, that's the 4 core modules. There's still kind of scope for optionality in year 1 as well. We have a range of optional modules as well that students can kind of use to start shaping their first year according to their own sort of tastes as a kind of as a learner. So we have modules on American literature, both the 19th century and the early part of the 20th century. We have modules available in creative writing, even for students on the single subject English BA, which you can take either together or separately. We have modules on film and literature if you want to explore the relationship between cinema and writing, on feminist fiction as well if you want to explore the very close relationship between feminism as a movement and literary texts, and also a module on literature for children and young adults if you're interested in the way that kind of ideas of childhood and children have kind of changed over time and how that's reflected in literature that's written for them. Year two, we have it becomes much more kind of optional, much more kind of choice based. Again, it's students really can sort of organize their studies around their own interests. We only have 2 core modules out of 6 in this, and they both kind of continue the work of year 1, and they're called critical perspectives 1 and 2, and they're about kind of introducing students to ideas that we can kind of take from other neighboring disciplines around English. So what we can learn from psychology, what we can learn from politics, what we can learn from philosophy, and how those disciplines allow us to kind of access and tap into and unlock sort of strands of meaning in text that would otherwise be closed off to us. So again, it's about kind of extending your reach and your vocabulary as a kind of thinker and an analyst. We also in year 2 have a kind of suite of what we call vocational modules, which are not kind of academic, but are very much kind of tailored to thinking about what career you might want to take after graduation, and they give you real kind of boots on the ground experience of a range of different sort of fields of work. We have 2 educational modules, one that deals with education overseas, teaching English to speakers of other languages, or TESOL, which actually comes with a qualification attached to it. The CELTA, the Cambridge English Language Teaching Award, which is a kind of internationally recognized certification that allows students to kind of go overseas and teach in schools around the world. And students have used it to kind of teach in Thailand, in Saudi Arabia, and a range of different countries recently. We also have a kind of domestic education module as well, English and Education, which comes with a kind of placement at the local school, and all the assessment is kind of set by the school itself, so you get a real kind of real world flavor of what teaching is like in the 21st century. We also have modules on how to freelance writing, advanced creative writing skills, on publishing, which again comes with a placement at the local, at a small independent press, journalism as well. And for those of you who are kind of completely undecided about what you want to do with the rest of your life, Your Career in Other Stories is a module that's designed to kind of catch everything else and get you thinking about how you might put your degree to work when you yourself have to kind of go to work. But alongside those degrees, we also offer, alongside those modules, we also offer a very wide range of different kind of optional modules too, spanning the breadth from the kind of Middle Ages through to the contemporary, from looking at a figure such as Chaucer up to the legacy of the Windrush generation, and thinking about literature from the kind of post-war period up to the kind of early 21st century. We have modules looking at, again, at American literature in different aspects, in the Gothic and the development of the Gothic as a movement, using stories as a kind of a short story focused creative writing module. You can also look at Romanticism. You can look at the early 20th century. You can look at the 18th century if you're interested in that particular period. So I'd say this is a point in which you can really start kind of shaping your own learning around what you're most interested in. The third year kind of continues this even further, and everything in the third year, apart from the dissertation, which I'll talk about in a second, is optional. And again, the menu of options increases sort of exponentially as well. I'm going to run through these very quickly. So they cover kind of every imaginable kind of facet and aspect of English literature, and some, in fact, cover kind of literatures that were not originally written in English as well. So you can study Russian literature or French literature in translation in year 3, or Latin literature if you so wish. Again, they study every kind of, so we have period modules looking at the Renaissance or the Victorian. We have genre modules looking at things like tragedy. We have kind of more specialist modules looking at the intersections between medicine and literature in the Victorian period. More creative writing modules, such as a module on writing comedy. We have modules that look at sort of overlooked, kind of neglected sort of genres of literature, such as weird fiction, weird film, which looks at the pulp writing of the 1920s and the inspiration that it's had on late 20th century film directors, science fiction, modern poetry. We look at autobiography, we look at screenplays. If you're interested in a figure such as Jane Austen, if you want to continue looking at the Gothic as well, there's the opportunity to look at kind of the decadent Gothic of the 1880s and 90s. Essentially, again, it's a very, very kind of fluid, very malleable third year in which you really can kind of shape your studies around what you're interested in. And the kind of capstone of this is the dissertation, which is a large scale project, which is about the same length as a kind of standard journal article that students produce. And students really can write about whatever they want to for the dissertation. So essentially, we enable students to students are not kind of taught the dissertation. They're appointed a supervisor who acts as kind of advisor to help them identify, to shape their project in the first place, to shape their kind of research question, and to identify kind of useful criticism. But the actual project that is entirely the student's own sort of property to develop, and we do our best to kind of facilitate whatever choices students want to make. And students really do kind of take the opportunity either to kind of cycle back to things they've encountered earlier on the degree, they want to look at in more detail, or to kind of spread their wings and kind of look even further at things they're not likely to have encountered. So students look at kind of, again, authors not originally writing in English, such as Dostoevsky or the 1001 Arabian Nights, neglected or overlooked figures like the travel writer Gertrude Lowthian Bell, or sort of non-literary kind of narratives, such as, for instance, the development of the comic character Black Widow in Marvel Comics and Marvel films more recently. And also, again, sort of genre fiction is available, or various kind of other thematic groupings. As I say, students really, the dissertation gives students a kind of opportunity to really kind of dig their teeth deeply into a kind of project of their own choice, and students really do kind of run with this idea, as you can see from that range of titles there. Okay, moving on to more kind of logistical matters now. So teaching at Leicester involves kind of mixture of lectures and seminars. Seminars are kind of small group discussions, typically a dozen students, often a bit smaller, which meet regularly every week to kind of talk about a particular text with the same tutor. And really kind of a lot of our modules are even kind of taught exclusively through seminar. We see these discussions as being the really kind of pivotal and central to teaching, and we do our best to sort of ensure that students do feel kind of happy and to kind of contribute to them. They're more kind of discursive and kind of dynamic than the lecture. The lecture is essentially there to kind of give you some background, basic kind of information about a movement or a figure or a text or a historical period or an idea. The seminar is where the real work is done, and often the two will kind of work in tandem with each other, but the seminar is where the real sort of refinement and development of ideas happens. There are also kind of the opportunity to do one-on-one tutorials. We have kind of workshops and more kind of logistical sort of concerns as well, film screenings as well. We also offer one-to-one meetings. Students have the opportunity to meet any tutor on a one-to-one basis if they want to kind of catch up with them. And so essentially the degree kind of gives you a minimum of kind of 9 or 10 hours contact time a week, but in some weeks that can be kind of stretched quite far. We like to give students plenty of time to kind of do the reading and the researching and the thinking that they need to do to prepare for the lectures and the seminars. In terms of coursework, all of our modules are assessed by coursework. There is no assessment by exam whatsoever. The coursework takes a variety of different forms, so it can be essays, and usually is essays, but there are kind of film and theatre reviews, there are presentations, posters, group projects, smaller kind of analyses, formative exercises, online tests, various ways of kind of assessing you. However, there are no examinations on the degree, and most of the modules that we have will have multiple assessment points to ensure that you're not kind of just putting all your eggs in one basket, and you do actually have the freedom to kind of experiment a bit between assignments and essays and kind of track your progress in individual modules too. We have very kind of well-developed support system at Leicester as well. One of the things I mean, you can see on the screen for yourself the range of different sort of types of support we offer, but I will mention the kind of personal tutor, which is third from the bottom, which is a sort of go-to point of contact that every student is given as they enter the department, and it will be a kind of tutor much like me or one of my colleagues, and students kind of will meet the tutor fairly quickly, and they're, as I say, they're kind of an all-purpose sort of consultation point that they can talk to throughout their 3 years with us. So any questions at all, the personal tutor is there to ensure that students feel kind of that someone's got their back. There is a kind of a safety net for them to sort of turn to. I'll say a bit about kind of careers very quickly. I'm not going to dwell on this slide for very long. Essentially, English is a very good option if you want to. It comes with the students often find, graduates often find that they have kind of quite high starting salaries. Also, it kind of science has recently kind of proven in this article in Journal of Experimental Psychology. It also improves our kind of compassion and our ability to kind of think kind of critically, reading and engaging with fiction. It has a very good employability rate as well. 86% of English graduates are in work within a year of graduation too. Again, as I say, I won't dwell on that any further. In terms of our own graduates at Leicester, you can see a huge range of different kind of activities they've engaged in, from archivism, teaching at various levels, both at university level and at different sort of school levels as well, and the media, marketing, PR are all sort of areas that our students kind of move into. You can see the range of different kind of companies that they also kind of, from broadcasters to charities to sort of government sort of bodies. They, again, because it's a very sort of wide range of skills, all about kind of digesting complex information, making it accessible to other people. These are skills that can be used in a huge range of different walks of life, and students really do occupy a huge range of walks of life, owing to the skills we kind of inculcate in them and emphasize throughout the degree at Leicester. Just to kind of recap of the application process. So our degrees, once again, English, English American Studies, English History, English Journalism, English with Creative Writing. We ask for ABB, and that's the kind of typical offer we make. However, there is kind of some negotiation possible, particularly if you have an EPQ. There's information about the application process. If you have a different grade profile online as well, there's the link there. There are scholarships as well. So again, that it's worth kind of exploring those online if you do feel you are eligible for that kind of financial help. And again, I'll kind of recap. So once again, our degrees offer kind of access to a wide variety of English literature from different movements. It's a very kind of flexible degree that allows you to organise your study around what you're interested in, rather than imposing a kind of narrow track on you that you have to kind of follow religiously. But also we're a kind of welcoming, supportive kind of community as well, in which we really do want our students to do well and just kind of succeed in their endeavours, and we'll work very closely with them to ensure that. My email is there again, so if you have any more questions that kind of occur to you after today, please do let me know. Shall I stop sharing now and see if there's any kind of questions in the Q&A?
Yeah, thank you, Ben. Thank you for that.
Am I still sharing, or?
No, we're still on screen. Good. That's Excellent. Fine. So one question has come in. So how is English different at university compared to how it's studied and taught at school?
Okay, very good. Very good question indeed. And very kind of fundamental, I suppose, to everything I've been saying, really. It's worth kind of pointing out that we do have that first year module, Writing Matters, which is all about sort of making clear to students what those differences are. So you're not just left to kind of work it out. It is something that we do sort of lead you through very sort of carefully and very sort of deliberately in a very kind of self-conscious way. The big sort of difference is that we don't have learning objectives in quite the same way that A-level does. So A-level, of course, when you do all of your assessments, you have a kind of long checklist of things that absolutely have to be kind of mandated, and you have to work through those very sort of carefully and ensure that you kind of stick closely with that. In English at university, because we're trying to foster a greater sense of independence, a greater sense of kind of ownership of your own work, we don't sort of have those very, very precise kind of bullet points for you to work through. Instead, we have what are called marking criteria, which are a bit sort of I guess looser, because we want to kind of encourage you to think in a more kind of independent way. Obviously, you don't have to kind of throw everything out you've learned at A-level. That is all really useful knowledge and really kind of fundamental at university. It's just the kind of next logical step. What we're asking you to do is kind of develop your own voice as a kind of analyst and a writer and a researcher. And we do, in fact, very much encourage you to kind of carry out your own research, engage with questions in your own way, rather than kind of prescribing through the learning objectives. This is the only track that you have to take. We do want students to kind of find their own way to kind of answer questions and feel kind of, as I say, kind of, again, that word I keep using, but confident, sort of building up their own sort of responses to things, solving their own problems, thinking critically for themselves, rather than sort of following that kind of that narrow tightrope that the ILOs kind of impose on you. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you, Ben. That's really helpful. Okay. We're running short of time, so just want to say thank you, and thank you for everybody for joining. If there are any more questions or any more information that you're looking for, please do log on to our website, le.ac.uk/study/undergraduates, where there's lots more information there. And yeah, thank you very much once again.
Thank you for joining me. I hope that was informative. As I say, my email is on there. I'll pop it in the chat as well in case anyone wants to kind of ask me anything after today.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, thank you.
Bye-bye.